Welcome, everyone. We are so happy to have you joining us for our hopeful storytelling session for Reverse the Red Day week, as we're calling it. I have a fantastic panel for us today of storytellers who focus on wildlife, environment stories, anything hopeful and positive. And we're really excited to have this conversation with you today. As we get started, I wanted to thank all of our executive committee members. Reverse the Red is a global coalition, and we are co-chaired by the IUCN Species Survival Commission and the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And all of the work that we do is because of the support and dedicated time of the experts from these organizations at our executive committee. So please share stories from them. You'll see those coming out this week as well, all of their members and their stories in each of their networks. So many fantastic things happening across the conservation space throughout our network. We also wanted to thank our annual financial sponsors who make our webinars and all of our storytelling possible. And without them, we wouldn't be doing all of the work that we're doing, being able to show up to the World Conservation Congress, host the World Species Congress, and have conversations like this. So I am going to kick us off with the Reverse the Red video, and then we will do a round of introductions and get started with our conversation.
In a powerful show of support for nature, nearly every government in the world united behind the CBD's sweeping biodiversity plan for life on Earth. They committed to halting the extinction of threatened animal, plant, and fungi species. And in an historic first, they also committed to helping those species recover, so that the life we share our planet with can not only survive, but thrive. Making these goals a reality will take all of us working together. Reverse the Red is supporting governments, conservation experts, and communities around the world as they join forces to activate tried and tested tools and tie global efforts to local expertise. All in a coordinated effort to assess, plan, and act for wildlife. Together, we can save species from extinction. Together, we can secure our planet's future. Together, we can reverse the red.
So again, thank you all so much for joining us. We are really excited to have this conversation about hopeful, optimistic stories. For us at Reverse the Red, we are a global coalition, and one of the things that really kicked off the beginnings of Reverse the Red at least 5 years ago in conversations was that the conservation community needs more belief that we can do this. We have really big goals to reverse declines for species, save species from extinction, and a lot of the environmental news out there is doom and gloom, and we wanted to change that. And that's one of the reasons that we host Reverse the Red Day every February 7th. So thank you all for coming to this session and for sharing your hopeful and optimistic stories as we gear up for Reverse the Red Day. A couple of housekeeping notes before we jump in. If you'd like to introduce yourselves in the chat, let us know who you are, where you're coming from. That would be wonderful. We are so excited to have you all here. If you have questions for any of us throughout the session, please feel free to utilize the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom. We will answer those questions throughout our discussion and maybe type out a few answers to you. And then finally, if you would like captions or translations, you do have the ability to show those at the bottom of your Zoom as well. The translations are AI generated, so we will not guarantee anything in there, but hopefully they help if you would like those. So without further ado, I have a wonderful set of panelists, and I would love to ask each of you to just introduce yourself and then also share one positive story from your world. It can be a recent story, it can be a new development, just something that is exciting you today as we get closer to Reverse the Red Day. So, Alex, I have you first. Why don't you go?
All right. Good morning. Thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Alex Getz, and I'm a wildlife filmmaker and co-founder of a company called Running Wild Media that specializes in telling stories of wildlife and conservation, in hopes that we can inspire conservation in everybody's own backyards. So a positive story. It's kind of like a temporary win, but a lot of communities around Northwest Ohio, where I'm based, and it seems in the Midwest, are doing moratoriums on data centers, which has become kind of a huge concern in this region just because of the fresh water available. And so I think in December, I found there was 592 facilities planned or already operating in the Midwest, and it just seems to be growing. And we have a globally rare ecosystem here in my backyard, and so the fact that we can temporarily pause things and hopefully give people the chance to think about the impact of these data centers is a temporary win for us.
But still a great win. We always talk
Yes.
about it, Reverse the Red, that our success stories are all along the way, all along the process, right? It can be the final success, but it's also all of those little pieces and parts that make it happen. So that's awesome. Sharon, how about you? Please introduce yourself and share your positive story for this week.
Well, it's great to be here today. And I think we all need inspiration and, um, you know, little, big, any wins, any steps forward, they build on each other. For me, one of the most hopeful initiatives that is becoming a global paradigm is the concept and practice of reconnecting habitat. So it's wildlife corridors, it's wildlife crossings, and there's a project that I and my husband, photographer Steve Winter, have been involved in for a long time. It's the Wildlife Annenberg Wildlife Crossing in California, which will reconnect habitat for cougars and all kinds of other wildlife that has been completely cut off into fragments of habitat by those large freeways. The Wallace Annenberg it will cross a 10-lane freeway and it will open in 2026. But I'm now a contributing editor who just launched a new wildlife desk at Mongabay. And we are doing a whole series of stories on wildlife corridors and crossings. Regardless of politics globally, this has really become the new 21st century paradigm, because simply saving land is no longer enough. On a planet with more than 8 billion people, roads, settlements really have bisected the land, and animals need to move to survive. But that is being remedied worldwide. So look at what's happening near you.
That's an excellent story, and really excited to continue following along with Mongabay's series on wildlife crossings. That's really exciting. And last but not least, Jacob, how about you? Introduction, please, and also your hopeful story for the week.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. I'm Jacob Simon. I am a video content creator on all the social media platforms. My handle is at Jacob Simon Says. And I report good news, stories of progress, unique solutions, and people building a better future. Basically, my goal is to replace dread and fear with hope and action through storytelling. I cover all sorts of positive stories, from the big stuff down to community wins where people just comment something fun that they did, pick up some trash on the way to work or something like that. and try and create this community of kind of action. And yeah, I'm happy that Alex and Sharon, you shared those stories because I've covered very similar ones. I just heard that over the past year, at least 25 data centers have been canceled in the US and another 99 are in contention. So that's promising to see. And I was also just doing some research on a story in Chile's Patagonian Cochamo Valley, where there's a area 383 times the size of New York's Central Park that was up for sale. And basically through community crowdfunding, they raised the $63 million it costs to buy it. And they had many millions left over to continue managing it as well. And it's connecting a huge corridor, 4 million plus acres of protected lands between Chile and Argentina. And just one more, I'm cheating by saying multiple stories, but I was also invited to witness this stunt where a Rembrandt drawing of a lion called Young Lion Resting was up for auction. It was the last Rembrandt drawing of an animal in private ownership. The rest are in museums. And 100% of the proceeds to that were going to lion conservation. And they basically did this stunt where they made the lion in the drawing disappear, vanish. And it was cool to witness how they handle this fine art and everything. But it was also a cool awareness piece on why do people care more about a drawing of a lion vanishing than actual real life lion populations vanishing. So to drum up some attention on the fact that we need to protect lions, but then also do something great. It was auctioned for $17.8 million, and 100% of that is going to lion conservation, which is pretty unprecedented. So that was cool to be in the room for as well.
That's fantastic. And I love that we all have different mediums and focus on different types of stories. So one question for all of you is, why do we tell stories? That can be us here in this room, but also why should all of our conservation professionals, all of our conservation partners, why do we tell these stories? Why should we tell these stories? And why should we tell hopeful stories?
Well,
Sharon.
I'll jump in. There's a lot of impact that can come from storytelling. It simply can be public education, and that is really important. It can not only spark awareness, but it can spark action. If people reach out to their elected officials and show support for conservation, land, wildlife, it not only can spark legislative changes, which some of our work does. It makes a difference. Photography, film, storytelling, it can change the world, and it has changed the world, and it continues to change the world. So I think it's really, really important. And it's also at the basic, a very basic level, it's our humanity. Storytelling has always been part of being human, whether it was sitting around a fire and telling stories. It's what we do. And if we can do that and spark change and make a difference, we need to do that. It's our mission. It's my mission.
I think following up with what Sharon said about the impact, a lot of the stories that we've recently been focusing on have a scientific component to it, and we highlight the biologist's work, but something that we've really gravitated towards lately is finding everyday people who have been inspired to make a difference in their own backyards. And so our hope with that is that they can become an example to viewers that, somebody somewhere has decided to like really step up and take the initiative to improve an ecosystem near them, or introduce a species that has been missing, or support a conservation organization. And we hope that ultimately that does inspire kind of the everyday person who maybe doesn't have a biology background or the connections to different conservation organizations to look into what they can do in their own backyards.
I'm going to jump again and just quickly say that, we all have a different role. We can all make a difference. And often scientists aren't good at communicating their findings. And it's really important to get that out in the world. And so it's almost like sometimes we're the translators, or we're the megaphone.
Totally agree. And I also think that from the social media perspective, there's a lot of competition for people's attention. And when you're trying to tell a climate environmental conservation story and people are seeing stunning travel videos and food reviews and cute cats and all this other stuff that is quite enticing, and you have a highly technical scientific story, it's hard to get someone to stop scrolling and listen to what you have to say. And the best way that I've seen people do it is through a story. And really, what that story does is invoke an emotion in the viewer, and it makes the story relatable. And I find that on social media, off social media, basically the story needs to either understand the viewer, entertain the viewer, or teach the viewer. And ideally, it's doing all three at the same time. And that's what gets someone to stick around and listen to what you have to say. And then also, perhaps more importantly, remember it. I think if I was just listing a bunch of data and stats and facts, it might get through to someone in the moment, and then they scroll through 100 more videos and forget what I was talking about. If I tell them a very enticing story, they might not remember all of the details, but they'll remember how it made them feel, and something will trigger it and it'll come back to them, because we just remember stories. They're quite sticky in our minds as humans, much more so than numbers and percentages.
One of the best pieces of advice I got from someone at some point in my communications career was that you want to leave people wanting more. You want them to want to look the thing up, the story up, look up the organization you're talking about, look up that project. You want them to want more of that story and to find more. So Jacob, I'm just wondering, since you mentioned the stunt with the Rembrandt in your intro, how do we make people care about this story? You mentioned some good things, but do we need a stunt? Is there something we can do with framing the characters in the story?
Yeah, I definitely think a character helps. I've discovered that over the years of my storytelling, making a bunch of videos, where humans are social creatures and we like to relate to another human. But I don't think the character has to be a human. It can be a team, it can be a species, it can be a bunch of different things. But I think having that central character is what's kind of the through line in all the stories we love to consume and all the books we read and the movies we watch and all that stuff. There's a character that we're rooting for or rooting against. And that's what makes someone understand it. We see ourselves in the characters, and ultimately what all of us are doing here is trying to invite people to take an action or a series of actions, right? Like that's why we're doing this. That's why we're communicators. It's to spread awareness and information, but also have people take that next step and get involved. And a story provides that point of inspiration that a character can just take it a lot further in. And there's several different results that can come from that. But I think ideally the viewer is inspired to support the character in the story you're telling and continue their mission, and also bring something to their own community and maybe enact a similar solution and get inspired to walk in their footsteps, so to speak. So I think we have to reach people on an emotional level. The best way I know how to do it is through character-focused storytelling. There's some other ways too. If you're really funny, people love humor. Unfortunately, I'm not, so I'm going to stick to storytelling. If you have like really amazing visuals, of course, that helps too. There's different ways that you can frame your story and have a structure, and have on social media have good editing and good music and all that stuff. But at its core, if I just sat and talked to the camera for a minute and told a really good story consistently, that'll do a lot better than all the other fancy schmancy stuff.
I'd like to offer a tangible example. About, I don't know, a little more than about a dozen years ago, my husband, Steve Winter, photographed P22, Puma 22, a cougar under the Hollywood sign. It was a camera trap image. It took him 15 months to get that image. And it was part of a National Geographic story on cougars in the United States. And there's a population of cougars in California that have been so cut off, they're really inbred. And so they have nowhere to disperse when they're young cats looking for a territory. This cat made it across the 101 and the 405 freeways, two of the busiest in the United States, and got to Griffith Park, which is the largest urban park in the United States in Los Angeles. And he spent 10 years there. But he could never mate. He was never with another cat. But that photograph made him famous. And Angelenos fell in love with their cat. What happened is that urban wildlife education was put into middle schools. There's a permanent exhibit about him in the Los Angeles Museum of Natural History. And it sparked construction of what will be the world's largest wildlife overpass. And there were murals of P22 in every neighborhood across socioeconomics. And when he passed away, there was a memorial at the Greek Theater in LA that sold out in 2 hours and crashed Ticketmaster. So, this entire city fell in love with this cat, and it sparked amazing action. So, back to your point, Jacob, about storytelling, that cat changed an entire community and the way they feel about wildlife and what they wanted to do to protect urban wildlife.
And brought people together in such a cool way. I mean, I feel like I can't be the only one that often feels like I'm alone in some of my wants for the world. Of course, a lot of us feel the same way, but when a story like that resonates with so many people and we see the reaction of people that are not normally in this field doing something about it, we remember that we're not alone and we are in a strong community and we do so much better together.
Well, and that was part of the storyline. He was called the Brad Pitt of cougars and the world's loneliest, feline bachelor.
Aww.
I feel like that's a great point to bring up, and really something that like viewers, if they're thinking about how they can tell maybe the stories about the work that they're doing, is like a great vehicle for telling a story. And I know like anthropomorphism for some people, they feel either way about it, but P22 is like the best example. It's like once you created kind of a character, for lack of a better term, out of this cougar, it really did like captivate people and really capture their hearts. And that's definitely something that I think like uncharismatic species, sometimes like the researchers or the people who are protecting those animals can be a vehicle for like making an uncharismatic species a character. Um, but I think, yeah, thinking about how people can take their work or an animal in their own backyard and make it feel like a symbol or something people can rally around. Mascot's kind of a weird term, but in a way, a mascot. And like, it's a great vehicle for storytelling for anybody who's trying to like figure out how to tell their story as well.
Yeah, Alex, I wonder, can you tell us a little bit more about your work with the organizations that are working to save the Hellbender? Because that's something that, I mean, I think they're pretty cute, but generally they're probably in the less charismatic category.
I feel like a lot of people didn't even know what it was to know that it was kind of gross and a giant slimy salamander.
It
But
has a
I
good
think
name.
it's not gross. It's not gross. But the Hellbender salamander is the largest salamander in North America. And I mean, it gets to be like, I think upwards of like 2 feet and almost 100 years old. And it's mainly found in the Appalachian region. And so we did a film that talked about Hellbender salamanders as well as a community that was defending uh, their water and their watershed from a fracking company that was just trying to dispose of its waste in their community. The fracking company wasn't even based there. It was just like, that looks like a great place we can put our trash. And this community happened to be home to Hellbender salamanders. And so the organization that we worked with, the Hellbender, I think it was just the Hellbender Society, was kind of this informal organization of community members, these women who had come together and selected the Hellbender as their mascot and just like fought back for like 10 years against this fracking company and ultimately um, got the waste well to be just kind of covered up and unused. But at the same time, they had rallied behind this very uncharismatic animal that nobody really ever gets to see because it hides under rocks, doesn't move very much. But they became kind of its spokesperson for lack of a better term. And it was pretty awesome. It was really cool to see. And they hadn't even ever even seen a Hellbender salamander before except for Google imaging it. And so I don't want to spoil things, but I can leave a link to the film if anybody is interested in the chat. Let's see.
Tell us if it's definitely a hopeful story if everyone
It
watches
is
it all the
definitely
way
a hopeful
through.
story. Yeah. For my
Excellent.
own sanity, I can't do non-hopeful stories anymore. Like I feel like selfishly I'll just become too depressed and wallow away. So,
Well, you're in the right place. And
yeah.
yeah, sharing definitely recommend um taking a look and watching this film all the way through. For all of you then, so Alex, you worked with the community members and they saw really good impact from their whole campaign, which was part of your, story with the story that you told in the film. And Sharon, obviously that wildlife corridor impact is still in development across the world. We're seeing more wildlife corridors. For our audience, who is primarily our conservation practitioners working with the species, be they animal, plant, fungi, how would you recommend incorporating an impact strategy into your storytelling? And is it the impact of the impact that the subject of the story is having, whether that's the organization, that impact, or is it the impact that the telling of the story creates sort of afterwards?
Well, I think it's both. I think it's really important to lay out context, history, the facts, and you can do that in a narrative. It doesn't have to be boring. And it also really depends on your audience. For me as a journalist and photographer and producer, I can't I can't be an advocate. I can report all the information, but advocacy is for conservation organizations and nonprofits and other sectors. So again, it totally depends on what your audience is in terms of how you frame your story, but it's important to reveal a problem and all the information around it, and talk to professionals that have possible solutions and present them. Now, again, if you're a nonprofit, you can just present those solutions, and just a slightly different tone, but it's still essentially the same format.
Yeah, I'll be honest and say this is something I'm still trying to figure out a little bit, how to have and track the impact. I think that when I'm just making a normal video, I post almost every weekday, and the majority is just my own research and storytelling. And that the main thing I'm trying to do is break through the endless doom scroll. So the impact is let people breathe a little bit, let people remember that good stuff is still happening, that other people care and are taking action around the world, big and small. And when all we're consuming is negativity, it's not an accurate representation of the world. There are bad things going on, but there's also good things going on, and we should be consuming both and having some balance. And then when I team up with organizations to tell their stories, there's something more specific usually I'm trying to drive people to do. And that will be sign a petition or donate or join a newsletter or go to an event or build a bird nesting box in your own backyard. Or, I mean, there's a multitude of things. And I think that I am more effective at driving people to take action when I know that end result from the start, so that you can craft the story around it and you can emphasize the steps that it took to get this action going and maybe to make it succeed and how it can be done again, replicated. And I also think that trying to emphasize that a lot of people are doing this and we're in this together and there's a lot of people on deck, we're linking hands, we're all pushing for a better future together. It's not just you behind the screen that has to do this. It's all of us. I think that is quite effective as well.
I think what
Investigative reporting is also, really, really important. And although that may not be a solution story in its own right, it often sparks action that then brings solutions. And one example, some years ago, I spent a year investigating a place called the Tiger Temple in Thailand that was a really famous tiger cub petting tourist venue. And I was able to prove that they were trafficking tigers into the illegal Asian wildlife trade. And that sparked a global outcry. There were conservationists, scientists that sent letters to the Thai government. The Minister of Environment's office was flooded with letters and emails. And 4 months later, they went in and shut the venue down. It was 178 tigers, and they were trafficking them across Asia. I mean, to Laos, to other tiger farms where they were growing tigers for their parts and products. And, this was all for mostly Chinese, but also Vietnamese and other countries' demand for tiger bone wine, for pelts, and for all kinds of other tiger products. And it was kind of a blackfish moment for people to understand like what those animal petting venues are and how that links to things like illegal wildlife trade, as well as certainly, wildlife welfare issues, but on the grander scale, trafficking, the cartels that run trafficking internationally, making it a national security issue. It's not just a wildlife issue, right? These are really important stories, and even doing those can create powerful impacts that are solution stories. So, I think people need to also think more broadly. Solutions isn't just, oh, well, we did this and it's making a difference, but also looking into wrongdoing in a way that will have impact.
Alex, in your work, when you are working with an organization who is actively doing the efforts, like working on the species for recovery, are you filming start to finish? And like Jacob said, going in with the idea of the impact that you want to have at the beginning is good, but how do you balance that in your film work when you're setting up probably a long-term campaign for filming, and what does that look like for you?
I think oftentimes it takes different shapes. So sometimes an organization will approach us and hopefully like pretty early on so we can be involved in creating what we think would be the most effective tool for communicating their message. And yeah, like Jacob said, like the desired outcome I think does dictate the means in a lot of these situations, and it also helps to define who the audience is. And so I think for a lot of filmmakers, getting a million views on YouTube or selling out theaters is kind of like a driving goal for them. But oftentimes, if we're working on a project with an organization, sometimes just getting the whatever we create in front of like a group of one or two stakeholders is the most important means. So whoever the decision maker is in that moment, that could, move the needle towards whatever our desired outcome was. And so I think that's really important for people who are creating art or media that's trying to support a conservation message, is to really know like what the goal is before you create it. Because you might create a 60-minute film and you found out you just needed like five great photos, and the attention of like one decision maker or politician. And so we hope to be involved early on. Sometimes we'll come in a little bit later and it just takes a little bit of creative storytelling to fill in some of the gaps. Like the Hellbender film, I think we came in like 8 years into their fight and we had to like kind of fill in the audience on what has already happened and what's kind of coming up. And then, document what ultimately resulted.
That's a great point. I bet some of our conservation practitioner audience is wondering, because all three of you work in different mediums, how what does that look like for them? How do they pitch someone like you, someone in your field? How do they get their story in front of you?
I can go first. Yeah, so on the social media world, like I said, I'm posting a lot. I think one of the biggest benefits to running this completely by myself is that I can move quickly and make my own decisions. So I have the luxury that maybe Alex and Sharon don't have in just deciding to go with something and running with it quite quickly and, turning the video around in a day or two. Um, I think I started posting on social media because of the reach potential as someone, fresh out of college. I think never in the history of the world has it been possible to pick up my phone, talk for a minute, and reach 1 million people for free. Like that's just unprecedented. So I think that potential is very enticing. And I think because the social media landscape is also so filled with doom scrolling and negativity, I saw the importance in trying to break through that as well. So, I think I'm able to do that decently on my own, but really how I make a living and how this is the business is telling other people's stories in a more official capacity. And it's the same way as if I kind of find the story on my own. It's just I'm framing it in a way that organizations want and desire, and using the certain sentences and phrases and driving to a specific action. And I think it's a balance. Of course, on social media, we're at the mercy of the algorithm, and changes need to be made to content to maybe not be as good in my eyes, but better in the eyes of the algorithm. And there's bots and trolls and AI slop and weird suppression tactics and all sorts of stuff that you kind of have to work out. But I think for reaching the everyday person with visually interesting and stimulating content, it's really nice to have that ability to be scrappy and quick and turn around things quickly and disseminate information in a way that's accessible to an everyday person. I'm just walking around talking selfie style to my camera and trying to bring more attention to little known stories. That's really it at its core. And I think that a lot of organizations have really fantastic stories that they're not so fantastic at talking about. So, like Sharon mentioned earlier, it's kind of our job to be the middleman and to connect the dots between this amazing conservation story and what an everyday person would stop and listen to and consume or read. And I think that social media was just a very natural way for me to do that. And it's fairly simple to team up with social media creators. Just reach out, just say you have a story. We can chat about the best way to tell it. And, sometimes it's an official capacity, sometimes it's unofficial. And you're just like, here's the story in case you want to cover it. Or we can do, a series of collaborations over several months. Like there's a lot of different ways it can shape out. But I think in terms of different businesses, definitely the social media solo content creator is very relatively simple, I would say.
Well, I think, if we're talking, in terms of the time of turnaround, Jacob, quick, online publication, middle, and then Alex, film takes a long time, right? Yeah. But in terms of reaching out, I mean, Manga Bay has an online pitch form, and, we all look at those story pitches. And when we do take on stories, it's often a very quick decision. If an editor is interested in a story, there's not a very deep, editorial process. If it's something we want to do, we do it, which is a lot faster than, some other publications that have a much, longer bureaucratic process for story approval. And I think that certainly is true for print publications more so than online. So if you have something that you want to get out there, put together a good pitch and post it, and we'll take a look.
Yeah, mine definitely takes way too long. I mean, you can reach out on our website, runningwild.media, and we're always interested in chatting with people, but um, it will take quite a bit. And I know it's exhausting, I think, for some people who aren't as used to it, but films take a little while to make. I'm jealous of Jacob. I wish that we've tried to enter the social media space a little bit more because I do think for anybody who is trying to like get their story out, also that's a great vehicle for themselves as well. They'll learn how to probably translate to the like general audience a little bit better, probably because their scientific lingo needs to be translated a little bit more, but also like everybody who's working with wildlife or like whether it's a charismatic species or even a non-charismatic species, I mean you're living a pretty cool life, I think. And so I think there will be audiences out there who really want to see what your everyday looks like. Um, the glamorous and the very non-glamorous. I love the non-glamorous stories. I like to suffer a little bit, so yeah.
Well, that's great because we have a question from Anna about making a story about fungi or microorganisms enticing to people, how to create the same sort of emotional reaction. I think a lot of she notes that a lot of the stories about conservation and protection for environment focus on animals, especially the large charismatic ones. But does anyone have any advice about something like fungi?
Um, Last year, I was working on a series of stories on California, and we did a fungi story, and I think a lot of it was the amazing science of how that ecosystem is connected, and also the researchers and what they're doing and what they're learning, and the broader impact of the importance of fungi to an ecosystem. So yeah, go to Manga Bay and search, the fungi story that ran last year, and there's one idea of how to approach a story that you think people won't be interested in. It was actually a popular story. Who knew? Yeah, no, you can fascinate people with anything as long as you find the right way to tell the story.
I have a similar little anecdote. My most viewed story last year was about fungi on social media, and it was about a burial where basically the casket was made of fungi, and I focused it on the daughter of the man that passed away. That was the character of this story, and she basically followed her father's wishes in having a natural burial, and she used this fungi casket coffin that would break his body down and basically turned it into a garden. And it was it kind of had like a hook and a surface level story that wasn't super fungi related, but it opened the door to talk about the so many amazing things that fungi can have. And I think for me personally, like fungi is so fascinating. And I think maybe it's tricky to communicate some of these complex topics to people, but figuring it out really can hit quite hard.
I feel like finding a good character or subject can be a great vehicle for getting people interested. And then just maybe have fun with it. Like maybe it's not going to be a traditional film or photo story, but maybe there's a really creative way to depict it. I really enjoy I see social media posts. I don't know if I'm plugging somebody, but Scientific American does some really fun like stories about things and they have a lot of fun with how they tell them. Um, and I mean, just have fun with it sometimes. I think that, yeah, finding a subject who might be really passionate about it could be your vehicle for getting others interested as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things when I'm asked this question in some of the storytelling workshops that I do is that for our conservation practitioners, you also can be the story. You're the one doing the work. You are so passionate, whether it's fungi or, a salamander or whatever. You are so passionate about it. And I think, Jacob, you mentioned humans want to connect with humans. And so if you are so passionate about, the work that you're doing, people connect with that too. And so you can be that person talking about how interesting the fungi is and showing maybe a time. I've seen some really cool time lapses of fungi growing that makes it a really interesting visual. And so yeah, plenty of different ways. I want to make sure that we have time to ask this question because Bertha wrote in the Q&A, if there is time, I would like to know what singular moment or event inspired each of the speakers to go the storytelling route as a means towards helping conservation. And so I'm throwing that at you. At least for me, I know my answer while you all think of your answers for that is that when I was really little, I was going to camp at a nature preserve near my house, and I was going to camp at the zoo. And I really enjoyed all of the conservation pieces, but the people who were there, whether they were keepers or docents or my camp counselors, I was really inspired by them. They answered all of my questions, and I knew from that time that I wanted to do kind of the communication side of things because I loved that they were able to share their passion for the conservation work that they were doing. So that's mine while you've all thought of your answers. But let's see. Jacob, maybe you first.
Okay, yeah. A singular moment's tricky. I think it's a million different things that converged at the same time. My background was an athlete. I was a pairs figure skater, and that was my entire focus from when I was 7 till I was 22. But I was living in Colorado training at the Olympic Training Center out in Colorado Springs. And whatever free time I had, which wasn't that much, I would spend in nature. And I would go on night hikes and stare up at the stars and contemplate my place in the world. And then I had quite a bizarre experience where I ended up living on a goat farm in the middle of the desert. And I was literally just alone with 75 goats for a couple weeks. And I had many introspective, meditative moments and just saw a different way of living and saw how beautiful planet Earth can be. And I was like, if I could help people experience this in some way, then maybe I can break through to people because it was very obvious to me once I, was in this place at that time that I got to do something to try and protect this beautiful natural world. And I think best case, everyone experiences some great nature themselves. I can't force people to get out in nature. So the next best thing I can do is uh, make videos or tell stories about it or bring people into my world as I experience it. And I figured that if I can get close to having them experience it themselves so they kind of get this like vicarious experience through me, then maybe it can break through.
Wonderful. Sharon or Alex?
Alex, go ahead.
I definitely didn't have a transcendental goat moment, but that sounds amazing. I grew up in a city in Ohio, so my access to nature was pretty limited. It was really just watching TV, and going to the zoo when I was younger. And it's kind of odd, but like Jacob said, a number of events that kind of led this way. But my most vivid memory when I was like 4 or 5 is meeting an armadillo and they just like put it on the floor at the zoo and it like ran up to me and in that moment it blew my mind and I knew I wanted to work with animals in some capacity. But I'm terrible at math, I'm terrible at science, and so the biology route just didn't work for me. And then I saw Planet Earth for the first time and that kind of just blew my mind and was like, oh, I can film animals. And so it just kind of grew from there. Like, how could I film animals and wildlife? And then how could I actually like create media or art that protects the animals and wildlife that I love?
Well, for me, I came in with this deep love and fascination for nature. My earliest memory was bringing like, I don't know if it was a katydid or a grasshopper into the house, on my hand when I was maybe 3. And it's like, Mommy, its leg is hurt. And she's like, get that bug out of the house. It was not a nature aware family. But I've always really loved animals of all kinds. Dogs are actually my favorite animal. Tigers are number 2. But I became a photographer. I was mostly people and culture, traveled a lot. And I ended up working with scientists on a number of stories. And Mid-career, I went to graduate school and studied both environmental science and journalism, and switched, to largely writing and producing short videos. And there was a real watershed moment when my husband Steve and I were in Costa Rica in the rainforest, working for about 6 weeks. I had 8 assignments from the journal Science, photographing at that time. Being in the rainforest blew my mind. So when I went to graduate school, I knew that I was headed for environmental journalism. Just the beauty, the complexity, the threats, the need for a voice for the voiceless, that drove me. But at the very core, I love wildlife. Being out in wild nature is a spiritual experience. There's been lots of research on what nature therapy does for our health. It's primal.
Yeah, definitely. I feel all of those things as well. And that's a great example of just how our personal connections can help us tell stories. I think when all three of you tell your stories, you can feel how passionate you are about it. And I think that's really great storytelling. And we have a couple of other questions in the Q&A. I'm going to sort of combine them all since we're running quite tight on our time here. But as you know, Reverse the Red Day is on Saturday, February 7th. So do you have advice for any of our audience on telling their conservation story? Maybe it's a storytelling framework. Maybe it's strategizing awareness, like past awareness raising. Maybe it's, a specific medium to use. But do you have advice for our audience on telling their Reverse the Red Day story? Sharon, you can go first if you want, or
I think we've covered some of the really important factors to consider. Find the story, find the character, find the amazing blow your mind facts. Visuals go a long way, whether it's film or photography, can have a big impact. Not to say that writing doesn't matter, but again, sometimes one image can do it. Sometimes it's, a 2-hour film. Find the medium that works best. I think, Alex's advice earlier about, really figuring out the story you want to tell, the impact, the audience is really important in determining the medium and how you're going to tell that story.
I would say consistency is super important. Maybe this is ingrained in me and my background as an athlete, but I feel like repetition and a lot of practice is how you figure out what resonates with people. I've made probably 1,000 videos by now and all sorts of micro adjustments every time. And I would like to think that I've improved in my video creation and storytelling skills, but also people just recognize my face and my voice and the way that I disseminate information. And if they've resonated with what I've had to say before, they're more likely to stick around and listen to what I have to say now. So I think that, you can break through in a one-off story, of course, like a really good piece of content, a really good article, a really good film. But I think if you want this to be a sustainable long-term thing, you need consistency. You need to show up a lot and talk to your audience. And I'm always responding to as many comments and messages as I can to continue that conversation and education. And I think that because I have been consistent in my social media content, it builds a level of trust with my audience, with the platforms and their algorithms, and just with myself, that I now feel quite confident in making a good, compelling piece of social media content. And I think people trust me more than maybe if my face wasn't showing up on camera every day because they recognize me and there's that familiarity bias that is quite helpful. So as much as I would love to say like make a killer video and that's all you need to do, I think I need to be honest and say you need to make a bunch of killer videos and keep going over and over again.
I agree with Jacob, actually. I th like I what you said earlier resonated in that never before have you had like the opportunity to just open your phone and connect with a million people around the world. And I really think that that's true. It's the most accessible way. You don't have to have a background in film. And then, look at maybe the creators that you really enjoy the content of on social media platforms and, emulate or like take some strategies from what you're seeing and you're responding well to. And probably don't be afraid to reach out and ask people to like review your story a little bit. But I think it is just like being active on social media, trying different things, is the quickest way to hopefully grow as like a storyteller and telling your own story of conservation or wildlife that you're working with.
And to build on that, even if there's a story you want to get out there, perhaps you do apply it to different mediums. Perhaps you do, an online traditional story. Perhaps there is like a 3 or 5 minute video. Perhaps there's a 1 minute social media video. Perhaps there's, social media posts that are just photographs. So again, the world of storytelling continues to evolve and people taking information in a lot of different ways. So
That brings us full circle back to the lion. I feel like the art piece with the lion is, obviously there's groups out there advocating for lion conservation, but this was a new medium that they were trying, I think, to encourage an audience that maybe isn't the traditional conservation audience. It's the art world audience to understand what's going on in the world of lion conservation.
Yeah, and to use that in a phrase like collaboration is
Mhm.
important. Like collaboration between individuals, organizations, mediums, publications, all sorts of stuff. Like when we come together across different interests and we can overlap, that middle of the Venn diagram. It's just so much more effective that way. And I think I try and do it. I don't do it enough. I think we all can maybe do a better job collaborating more, but that's super important too.
I love that. And one of the things that gives me hope in all of the work that I do with Reverse the Red is that we have this Reverse the Red Day coming up on Saturday, and I get to collaborate with storytellers from so many different organizations. As you're all talking, I'm like thinking about all of the stories that I'm preparing to put out on Saturday for Reverse the Red Day about downlistings and rediscoveries and like all of these positive, hopeful stories that I'm really excited to tell you all. So in just the last 2 minutes here, just a one sentence maybe for each of you, in your work, like the way that you work, what brings you hope?
I would say that the the corridors movement is the most hopeful initiative I can imagine because it, changed from fortress conservation, just saving land, to connecting landscapes in the ways that nature needs to survive and thrive. So the this new conservation paradigm is beyond hopeful. It's really exciting.
I would say humanity, people. I know that we caused this mess, but every time I see a problem and do a little bit of research, there's without fail a bunch of really smart, dedicated people working to fix it. And that's really cool and really heartening. And I think that we have all these solutions that people are making reality. And I'm confident that that will continue and grow and evolve and keep pushing forward.
I definitely think the film subjects that we get to work with are really inspirational. Getting to see everyday people who have done something amazing in their region is inspiring and always makes me leave feeling like I could do more, but obviously I have to like manage personal expectations of what I can do, but it has encouraged me to be more active in my own backyard, um, in trying to affect change here.
That's wonderful. I'm so excited to see all of the positive, hopeful stories that everyone shares for Reverse the Red Day. And even hearing the examples from all three of you today has been wonderful and even, inspiring for me. Those are stories that we've not talked about at Reverse the Red yet. And so really excited to hear all of those as well. And thank you for giving all of your wonderful advice and insights and sharing your expertise in storytelling with all of our audience. I'm really excited about this conversation and hope that everyone has enjoyed it. And thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.